I was so disturbed by yesterday's ridiculous press conference by Sarah Huckabee. I came home, I got out of the swamp, only to see this article come out. And joining us now is one of the authors, Jonathan Easley, a writer with The Hill. Jonathan, thanks for being with us on such short notice.
Hey, John, my pleasure.
So it is amazing. This piece comes out, and my thoughts exactly. So let me outline what happened yesterday, and then I want to get your comments on it because it's a bigger picture, and we've had some callers earlier that don't agree with me. So yesterday was it for me. So there's a press conference scheduled by Sarah Huckabee at 1 o'clock. She shows up at 1:25. Okay, first of all, that's just rude. 1:05, I get it. In fact, the other reason I'm mad is we did the over-under on what time she'd be there. I made the over-under 1:15, and I lost $10. I bet the under. Somebody else bet the over, and I got blown out, right? So I had to pay him $10. So that made me double mad. Then she shows up. She's in there for 20 minutes exactly. She answers 8 questions. 7 of them are about the tweet. We can't get any questions answered, and she leaves. And she gave no answers of any substance, no on camera, nothing. I think they're making a huge mistake here because you can't get the questions out to get the answers of things that the legacy media might not want to focus on. But I think they're throwing the baby out with the bathwater. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard from a number of folks who feel the same way as you. And I mean, these press briefings, if you remember in the first weeks of the administration with Sean Spicer, they were getting huge ratings, and it was kind of an unfiltered way for them to get their message out. They didn't need the media. They could have the White House press secretary up there saying directly what the administration's positions are on some of these issues. And since then, it's been a deliberate sort of crackdown. It's not just that they're not rolling them on camera anymore or trying to limit use of the audio. I mean, we've seen sort of Spicer's tenor or tone change. I mean, he gives clipped answers. Same with Sarah Sanders, like you said yesterday. They don't really give much information, and they've sort of taken this sort of alternative means. They have background phone calls with small groups of reporters where they try to focus on a specific policy issue. But I've heard from a lot of folks who are just frustrated. People want to know what's going on at that White House, and they're not doing a very good job right now of communicating what they're working on.
I think it's going to backfire. It's backfiring now. It's hurting them because, number one, there's certain things going on, questions that you would like to ask that are not getting asked. So there's no level of accountability to the press. But the second thing is, because they made the decision, as I said earlier to my audience, Jonathan, to expand the number of press outlets to get credentials, which gives you a better feel and better questions. By now you have them in there, but not being able to answer their questions because you're mad at CNN or you're mad at the New York Times or you're mad at, ABC or NBC, I think is doing them a huge disservice because you can't give them an opportunity to explain to their base certain things that don't make any sense. Like, why don't we have an AUMF for 4,000 troops in Afghanistan? You campaign to get out of these wars. We're expanding wars. How does that reconcile? Right? I want to ask that question. Can't ask it.
Right. I mean, yeah. No. Well put. I mean, there's folks. You were there. John Gizzi, like you said, was there when we spoke earlier. I mean, they've got a whole range of folks that they could call on, from conservative media that never had access to the briefing room before that has access now. I mean, I understand their point that they don't, they'd like to limit these explosive exchanges with folks from the legacy media outlets. I mean, I think that's a valid complaint in some regards. I mean, it used to be you turn on the TV and it's just this endless B-roll of, a reporter getting in, escalating things with Spicer, and those things have become very, very contentious. But I mean, they can call on whoever they want. They don't have to call on CNN. They could call on you.
Well, exactly.
And like you said, you had other things you wanted to focus on besides Trump's tweets or the tapes or whatever. And it's surprising that they don't go that route.
Well, I found this week to be highly frustrating because I had a host of questions that you can't get answered. And you want to give them the opportunity to answer legitimate questions about what their positions are and what they're doing on camera. I mean, this is an opportunity for them to get their message out in a legitimate way. And so what they have focused on is a handful of journalists, Jonathan, in there that have a contentious relationship with the administration that are looking for the gotcha soundbite. Okay. Right. And I really understand, like, they don't want to participate in that, but that's part of the deal. Okay. So do your job, stand up to it, deal with it. But, you know, Jonathan, you got 2 rows of the most contentious media to them in the first 2 rows. All right. Mm-hmm. So normally Sean or Sarah on camera will try to call on all of them. Don't call on half. Right. I mean, there's a litany of other people in there that have legitimate questions that they need to be answered. And I really think they're going down a very dangerous path on this because I think it's going to hurt them in the long run. They were on the right path of opening it up so we can get access and get information back to our base, to our audience. I mean, I got out of that meeting yesterday. I don't even have anything to tweet. I mean, forget doing an article, forget updating my blog, forget what I had on my show today. I couldn't get 145 characters out of what happened yesterday. That is a colossal calamity and a waste of time, and it's going to bite them in the butt.
Yeah, I mean, you wonder how much of this is sort of, or where this is coming from. Whether they're waiting to get a new communications director in who's going to oversee the whole thing. Whether it's coming from Trump himself, who is unhappy maybe with how Spicer does at these press conferences, or maybe just despises the media so much he's telling them don't give them anything. But it's certainly a deliberate strategy at this point. I mean, we've seen how it was before. We see how it is now, and they're just they've made the decision not to they're not going to be putting out this much information, and they're not going to be rolling it on TV, and you're not going to be using the audio, and and I mean I think it just causes an unnecessary headache for them because. I mean, you're telling your listeners about it now. It's an issue. In one regard, I don't think anyone's ever going to feel sorry for the press or the media. I know what our approval rating is, but on the other hand, it can be a useful tool to get your message out, and it's one that they're not using right now.
You have to get legitimate information out in the right way. Otherwise, you're going to be a slave to the legacy media that put out what they want. Now, look, I heard Sean Spicer's. First of all, look, I think Spicer's done a great job. So, I mean, I see him when I'm there every day. When they ask him about tweets, he says, I'll let the tweets speak for themselves. You'll move on to something else. Now they ask him about the investigation. He's able to say, well, I'll have to defer to our lawyers for that. So you got an out there. That makes sense. But, he had an interview with radio talk show host the other day. And in that interview, Sean said, well, you got a number of people that want to get on camera there and make a name for themselves by asking a gotcha snarky question. Okay, so what? What does that have to do with anything? If you want to look, if you want to ask a stupid, snarky, illegitimate gotcha question, maybe they'll play it on MSNBC or something. Who cares, right? That has nothing to do with anything. But you've also got an opportunity to get legitimate questions about your policy from legitimate people that do news that is going to benefit you. And so it's not only changing the format, they've changed the attitude of it. And the attitude is now, I mean, yesterday's example, the message that Sarah Huckabee sent is, I have no respect for any of you. I'm 25 minutes late. I'm not going to say anything. I'm only doing this so I can put something out and say we had it. And basically, you all suck. That was her message.
Right.
Not good.
Yeah, I mean, what's the point? What's the point of even showing up to do those if you're not gonna even make an effort at answering the questions And it really is. It's kind of a show of contempt. They're showing up to say, hey, look, this is how we're doing it, and we just don't care. I also wonder if it's sort of beyond that. If it's we did have a stretch there where Trump was contradicting his spokespeople, which puts out a muddled message where you'd send the White House spokespeople go out, say one thing, and the next day Trump might tweet something else. I mean, I think they do have a point there. It's Trump. I think they'd like to have Trump speak for himself as much as possible, which is why I think we saw about 15 tweets yesterday, an interview on Fox and Friends this morning, and the rally in Cedar Rapids. I think that's obviously where the administration is most effective, when Trump is speaking for himself. But I mean, this is part of it. It's getting the team needs to be on the same message as the president, and they're just not there yet, I guess.
Well, they're throwing the baby out with the bathwater, and I think they're going down a very dangerous path, and I think it's going to hurt them. Because the only example I can give is me. I have a huge following of the Trump base around the country, and I have no information to give out today of any significance. How does that help them? And then
it's lost opportunity.
Thank you. Lost opportunity, lack of information. And so I don't think it's a good idea. And the other thing is, there's certain things that have happened this week within the administration that are counter to what he campaigned on, whether it's expanding the tax subsidies for companies to hire foreign graduates over our kids coming out of college. He campaigned against that. It's growing. I want to know why. I want to know what the plan is. That's legitimate. Can't get it answered. We just authorized 4,000 troops to Afghanistan. Trump campaigned to get out of these wars. No AUMF. Where's that? Reconcile that. Can't get that answered. The Ford Motor Company executives just basically thumbed their nose at the administration and said, this president has no juice. We're going to China. We're going to save $1 billion. There'll be no tariff. He'll send out a tweet. Who cares? I'll save $1 billion and I'll get another $100 million in my bonus check. Can't ask that question. So I think it's very problematic, Jonathan.
Yeah, and we're in uncharted territory here. I mean, not that the White House ever has an obligation to do this, but I mean, I think the way that they started off doing four of these or so a week on camera is that's how it's done traditionally, and there's a reason it's done like that traditionally. It's an opportunity for them to answer questions like that if the base is growing frustrated by what it's reading in the paper about some of those issues. Maybe it gives them a chance to correct the record or push back on those angles, and certainly they're just not taking advantage of it right now.
In your piece, you say senior counselor Kellyanne Conway argued that the GOP's special election victories and Trump's reception in the heartland is evidence that the administration's new approach to the media is working. That is about the most ridiculous statement I've heard in my life. First of all, they just started this 2 weeks ago. It has nothing to do with anything. And that is a totally ridiculous statement that she made. So now you're getting in absurd land. And she went out to say on Hannity, according to your piece, the hysterics inside the Washington cable news bubble haven't penetrated outside the Beltway, Conway said on Hannity last night. All this has nothing to do with anything.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's maybe the broader point of Trump goes to Iowa, he still polls thousands at the rally, and I think there is still broad support for him among the base, which you wouldn't know based on just turning on, obviously, CNN or MSNBC or even Fox News in some instances. It's the focus out here in Washington is Russia around the clock, and I think a lot of people were expecting the Democrats to win that special election just by virtue of, I guess, the energy that we've heard so much about that is on the left. I get the Washington cable news bubble thing, but yeah, I mean, I don't know necessarily how that pertains to sort of shutting down their access given to the media and really clamping down on what you're working on. I don't really see how they're related, but obviously I get the broader point of just certainly the perception of things inside Washington and the perception of things outside Washington are probably vastly different. And I don't expect too many people to be concerned about what the struggles that the mainstream press has in getting information out of the administration. But it certainly seems like they could maybe be a little bit more creative in finding ways to get information out if they're not going to be entertaining questions at these press conferences.
That's a bad idea. Jonathan, thanks for your article. You can read Jonathan Easley's article in The Hill, the newspaper, The Hill. Just go to thehill.com, thehill.com. Jonathan Easley. Great piece, Jonathan. You read my mind. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us today. Jonathan Easley from the newspaper, The Hill. Go to thehill.com. Thank you, Jonathan.